Welcome everyone once again. We are so happy to have Mr. and Mrs. Carter here for our town hall discussions. When students registered for today's event, they submitted questions that they wanted to ask both of you. And we noticed a few key topics emerged. So we selected the questions that best captured those themes. Each student you're going to hear from today will be reading the question they wrote. Our first question is from Maithili Apavar. She is an industrial engineering major and a student ambassador. She is from Mumbai, India, and has tutored special needs students in math and science.
President and Mrs. Carter, thank you so much for being here and for giving us the opportunity to speak with you. My question is, President Carter, how did your activities at Georgia Tech, both academic and non-academic, prepare you to excel later in life?
That's an easy question to answer. I did my sophomore year at Tech, and then I went from here to the Naval Academy. When I was at Georgia Tech, I entered the Navy. I was in the Naval ROTC here. So it kind of helped shape my life, and I went to 4 different universities in my student days, and the most difficult was Georgia Tech, by far. Is anyone here who disagrees with me? Raise your hand. It was very difficult and challenging. So I learned at Georgia Tech, I had to do my best to qualify to go on to the Naval Academy. And I had a job on the weekends to earn some money to help me pay for this. I was the first member of my family that ever went to college. My daddy and all my ancestors, way back 12 or 13 generations, never had a chance to finish high school. So I was very fortunate, and I looked on Georgia Tech as a great opportunity. And every time I see Georgia Tech mentioned as the #1 university in the nation for technology and for engineering, it brings back a feeling of warmth to me and gratitude. I told the audience just earlier that we're coming back to this hotel is nice because Rosa and I spent our wedding night here. This is our honeymoon night. And to come back to Georgia Tech is another great honor. And when I was president of the United States, the law in Georgia was that no one could receive an honorary doctorate from a Georgia institution unless they had attended school there and then become president of the United States. I was the person, so I came back and made the graduation speech at Georgia Tech and spoke to a larger group in this, I think, and received an honorary doctorate. So of that honorary doctorate and my initiation into the academic world of outside the Plains in Sumter County, I've always honored Georgia Tech for setting the highest possible standard of academic achievement and hard work. Thank you for your good question.
Before we move on to our next question, did you both want to do some opening remarks?
I'm sorry?
If you'd like to give some additional opening remarks before we move on to our next question, please feel free.
Well, I might tell you what the Carter Center is doing, and I know Rosa had a few more remarks to make as well. We left the White House and came back here to Georgia, and I was honored to be asked to be a distinguished professor at Georgia at Emory. So I've been a professor at Emory University now for 33 years, and every month I teach at Emory in a different school every month, and I meet with the president of Emory every month and the president's spouse. Now we have a female president, and also I meet with 3 or 4 of the professors and deans who are doing the most interesting research work to meet with me for an hour and a half. So we have a very intimate relationship there, but I think the best partner that Emory has is Georgia Tech. And as you may know, the last 13 years we had a president of Emory University who was an engineer, so that brought us even closer together. So the Carter Center has programs in 80 countries around the world. We negotiate peace agreements still. We monitor troubled elections. We've finished monitoring 103 elections, but 2/3 of our work is in the field of health care. And we go into foreign countries and the most remote and poorest villages in those countries, and we give treatments to people to prevent blindness and worms coming out of the body and worms growing in the body and so forth. And we administered our 500 millionth dose of medicine this past November, which is about half again as many people as live in the United States. And so we have programs all over the world in healthcare and in democracy and and freedom, and also in dispute resolution. That's what we've done since we left the White House. So I'll turn the program over now to my boss, Rosa.
Didn't tell you what we did, what happened the morning after our first night here. We got in the car to go get breakfast and ran straight through a red light into a car that was and both cars were the first ones that had been made, I guess made, after the first ones on sale after the war. This was 1946. So it was not very much fun, but ours wasn't torn up very much the front. we could still drive in. Well, I could have. Anyway.
That's all we'll tell you about our wedding night.
Anyway, I have worked on mental health. Were you in the room with the panel this morning?
No, they weren't.
Okay.
Most of them weren't.
There was a panel talking about us, and I don't know what they told whoever was there. I have worked on mental health issues for 46 years in January. I started when Jim was inaugurated, as soon as he was inaugurated as governor of Georgia. And I had a governor's commission on mental health, I had a president's commission on mental health, and I have a really good program at the Carter Center. And it's just a great program. We've worked on trying to overcome stigma, which is still a barrier for people getting help. Stigma's beginning to lift a little bit, but everything but stigma, I think. Stigma's beginning to change a tad. But everything else in the mental health field since then has changed. Because now we know that mental illnesses can be diagnosed, they can be treated effectively, and those living with mental illnesses can live good lives. They can recover and live good lives in the communities, raising their families, working, going to school, and so forth. Not everybody knows that, so we still have people, and we're still fighting stigma. And what we've done at the Carter Center, we've fought stigma all of these years. And what we did 20 years ago now was start a program called Rosa Carter Mental Health Fellowships for Journalism. Rosa Carter Mental Health Fellowships for Journalism. And we bring journalists to the Carter Center and teach them how to report accurately and in depth on mental health issues. And it's become an important program that is spreading now across the country and overseas. In fact, we've had programs in 6 countries, I think: New Zealand, South Africa, Romania, Colombia, and now in the UAE, United Arab Emirates. And we teach them the language that you use with mental health issues. You don't say, she's a schizophrenic, for instance. People don't like to be identified by that illness. You say she's a person living with schizophrenia. People with schizophrenia or any of the mental illnesses have feelings just like you and I do. They have episodes, but they have feelings and hopes for the future and those kinds of things, and it really hurts them if you say crazy about anything. There's just so much that we can learn. We actually have done a little pamphlet on the correct way to speak to those with mental illnesses, and you can call it up online and print it out. I think it's really important, not just for journalists, but for anybody who's talking to just the general public, to be sure you use the right words and don't hurt people. So I have a lot more to tell you about that, but Jim is motioning to me already.
Wonderful.
I've said often that the Carter Center hadn't done anything else in the last 35 years except Rosa's mental health program. It would all be worthwhile.
Let me just say 2 more things. We have a mental health program. We started one in Liberia. They had 1 psychiatrist. We were looking for after conflict, a post-conflict country. And we have other programs for the Carter Center in Liberia. So we have a program there. 1 psychiatrist only in the whole country. We have trained 160 mental health clinicians. We have 3 in every state. They call their states, and they call their counties. Yeah. 3 in every county. The counties are states, same as states. 15 counties, we have at least 3 in every county. And now the World Bank has asked us to do the same, this is for adults, to do the same thing with children. So we're beginning to train mental health clinicians to help with children. So important because of the war for 14 years and then Ebola, and so everybody needs help, almost. And what was the other thing that I wanted to, oh, we're working in Georgia. We only started this, well, it's been 6 or 8 years back. We've had a program every year for Georgia on issues, different current issues. But we started, there were 2 suits against our state from the federal government. And we joined in with advocates as friend of the court in one of them. And actually all the conversation between the federal people and the state people were all done at the Carter Center. And then we kept working with them and actually got a really good settlement. It's more than 5 years ago now, because it was for 5 years we're supposed to move every adult out of a hospital to a place, find a place for them. Everyone that comes out of the hospital has to have a place to go. And so now we're working with children. The only ones that we haven't been able to do, working with the state is doing it, we're just trying to help, is those with intellectual problems, like so many have been in bed all their life with some kind of illness and are impaired in some way. And so it's really, really hard to find places for them to go. But we're helping the state with it. And I just wanted you to know that we are really working in Georgia. Now we started a program in North Georgia, corner of North Georgia, taking children in need and trying to keep them from having a first incarceration. And it's a pilot program and it's just working great. The judges in that area take care of that program.
Wonderful. I think you're going to see some of the questions our students have actually touch on the issues you both just mentioned. Our next question is from Austin Kennedy. Austin is majoring in industrial engineering, and he is a former vice president of the African American Student Union. He's also interned with MARTA's Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity.
President and Mrs. Carter, again, thank you both so much for your decades of service and advocacy and for coming to visit us here at Tech today. My question is, for those of us who are studying, those of us students who are studying science, technology, engineering, and math, what are some of the key opportunities that you see for us to intervene to affect social change?
Well, you know, there have been several people who've gotten to the top of the political arena as presidents who were engineers. And I think having a background in engineering myself, it was a great help to me. It taught me to address even the most complicated political issues in a logical fashion, to analyze all of the factors involved and then try to make a judgment, and which is a typical move toward of an engineer to solve a difficult problem. So to solve problems, and I think the essence of engineering is to be based on facts and the truth. I think the most important aspect of any politician is to tell the truth, which is not always easy. It's one of the most difficult things. So to base your decisions on a deep study and analysis of the facts, and to tell the truth about it and to accept the truth in making your preparation of the things that come to me as an engineer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Maya Goldman. Maya is getting a master's degree in civil engineering. She has traveled to Peru and helped rural communities develop water sustainability plans.
Well, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, thank you so much for being here. You're both such an inspiration for me and all the students in this room. My question is, how do you connect or reconnect with people of different worldviews than yourselves?
Well, one thing that I learned at Georgia Tech was the rudiments of Spanish, so I could carry on a conversation in Spanish, not very well. But that's one of the things I learned. But I think best thing is to have had a background where I was very lucky. In the community in which I grew up, about 2.5 miles west of Plains, Georgia, all of my playmates were African American. And all the people with whom I worked in the cotton and peanut fields were African American. And the people that took care of me, my mother was a registered nurse and she was gone a lot, they were all African American. And I wrote a book about my early life called An Hour Before Daylight, which is still on sale, by the way. and at the end of the book, I tried to think of the 5 people who shaped my life, in addition to my mother and father. Only 2 of them were white. The other 3 were African American. So out of that environment of learning how to live harmoniously with and to love other people who were different from me, I took with me a knowledge of the great benefits to do away with segregation and discrimination and the beneficial effects on the violators and also the victims of segregation. And that's been the foundation of my whole life and the Carter Center's life. And the presidency, when I was there, was to honor human rights. So I think that to treat other people with respect, with dignity, and with honesty, and with care, and don't violate their human rights is one of the great things. One of the primary areas of the world where the human rights policy paid off was in Latin America. When I got to be president, almost every country in South America was a military dictatorship. Because the presidents before me, I'm not criticizing them, you know, they were in bed with the dictators. And we got special privileges on iron ore and copper and bauxite and pineapples and bananas and everything. And we did our business through the dictators. But when I got in office and put human rights first, it let the dictators be overthrown eventually by the people themselves. And now every country in South America is a democracy. And that was brought about because of our respect of people who had different views from us. Thank you for the good question.
Well, we've traveled so much, we have programs in 80 countries from the Carter Center. And so we go into areas with different cultures all the time. And my favorite places to go are in the African countries where people need so much help, and when you help someone, they're so thankful for it. Like when we're trying to eradicate guinea worm, this horrible disease, we teach them to drink water, strain the water, and they won't get guinea worm. And you would think we do actually save them so much suffering and so forth, but it's so wonderful to them. It's so simple, and they'll say, why didn't somebody tell us this before? So that's been really wonderful to get to know them and work with them and see how excited they are. But there's another way that anybody here can connect with people of different cultures, and that is by working for Habitat for Humanity. We build houses for people who never ever dreamed they would have a house, never ever dreamed they'd be able to pay for one. And yet for Habitat for Humanity, they pay cost. But the Bible says if you lend a poor man money, you don't choose your interest. So it charges no interest and makes payments low, and they're able to pay them. And it just is something to your heart to see somebody get a house of any culture, somebody of any culture get a house that they never thought they would get. And we go 1 year overseas, and then 1 year back here in the United States.
Great. Our next question is from Justin Lanier. Justin is a second-year PhD student in mathematics. He is a Louisiana native who is researching geometric group therapy.
Wow.
Theory, excuse me.
I hope I can understand your question.
President Carter, Mrs. Carter, it's a pleasure. You both grew up here in Georgia and have lived a bunch of your lives here. You've also had a chance to see so much of our country and the world and meet so many different kinds of people. So as Southerners, with such a unique and global set of experiences, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about what being a Southerner means to you, and what it means to be a Southerner today, and perhaps how that meaning has changed over the course of your lifetimes.
Well, we've been to about 145 countries, my wife and I have been. And in other foreign countries, people don't hold it against us because we're from the South. And when I was elected president, I was the first one in almost 150 years from the Deep South. I think James K. Polk came before me. You can pick up the number of years, I can't remember exactly. But no one else has been considered from the South because we were afflicted with the consequences of racial segregation, which was legal in our country for a while. So when I became president, I chose Andrew Young, a black congressman from Atlanta then, who later became mayor here, to be my United Nations ambassador. So I generally went along with what Andrew Young recommended for dealing with people in the poor countries about whom I didn't know. And one of the things we learned very quickly as president, in particular since we left the White House and have been in villages and building homes, is that the people that we underestimate quite often as very poor and suffering from diseases that are unnecessary and being able to go through life without providing a decent house for your own family to live in, is that those people that we underestimate are just as smart as I am and just as ambitious as I am. And their family values are just as good as mine. And their ambitions and aspirations and so forth are just as great as mine. So we learned that they are equal to us in every aspect of human nature, although they may be poorer in wealth and privileges. So that's the great learning process that we've had. But I never have had very much difficulty dealing with people overseas. I've had a few problems dealing with some Yankees, but you know, we've been able to get over those as well. So I think now we've kind of broken the ice, and now Bill Clinton has come from the Deep South, as you know, pretty much. Not quite as deep as Georgia. But I think we kind of broke the ice and permitted Americans to be looked upon as equals. And it was the overcoming of racial discrimination, which afflicted us so long, it opened up the opportunity for me to be accepted on a nationwide basis. So it's helped me in foreign countries as well, as you can see. Thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Our next question is from Ivy Fidelibus. She is a public policy major from Lookout Mountain, Georgia, and she works with Jumpstart, a literacy program for low-income preschool students.
Thank you all for this opportunity. My question is for President Carter. Which of your presidential policies do you believe has the greatest relevance today?
Tell the truth.
What's mine?
Well, I think that's the most important thing that we need from every public official, and it's one of the most difficult commitments to carry out because the pressures on somebody seeking office to accommodate whoever might vote for or against that person is very great, and to tell the truth in every instance, even when it's deleterious or harmful to you, is a very hard thing to do. And most of the serious problems that presidents have experienced, you know, to be impeached even, is when they lie about a somewhat simple matter, like Bill Clinton having extramarital sexual affairs or Richard Nixon with Watergate, but because they didn't tell the truth. And when they're found out to be a liar, then the people right against it. So I would say the most important single thing that a public official or any person can do in life is to just tell the truth. So it's not, although it sounds very simple, I saw you were disappointed with my first three words. But it's a very difficult thing to do. I think telling the truth is the most important part. Well, you know, people ask me sometimes what my legacy might be, what I'd be proud of. You know, we kept the peace. We never fired a bullet. We never dropped a bomb. We never launched a missile when I was president. And we also honored human rights. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was passed right after the Second World War is something that every one of you might look up. Just call it up on Google, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or just human rights, and read it. Only 30 paragraphs. And in our great country even, we tend to violate those 30 brief requirements for human rights. About 3 years ago, I wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times, and I delineated those. The United States of America at that time, of which I'm very proud, was violating 10 of the 30 paragraphs in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it's a good thing to follow as a policy. So human rights, peace, which are also compatible with my religious beliefs.
Mrs. Carter, would you like to add something? It looked like you maybe have a differing opinion.
Well, the incoming president tried to do away with this. The one that, as Jimmy said, had us leave the White House involuntarily. Tried to stop it. The first two people he had for state dinners were two countries that Jimmy would not allow us to go to because they had such human rights abuses. But it was so powerful by the time we left that he couldn't stop it. And so it's part of our foreign policy.
Wonderful. Let's move on to our next question. This one is from Rebecca Robbins. She is a biology major from Kansas City, Missouri, and her question is for you, Mrs. Carter.
Okay, President and Mrs. Carter, first I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. So Mrs. Carter, my question for you is, how have your initiatives impacted the mental health community within the United States?
I hope it's had some impact on the mental health community in the United States. I've worked on it so long, and I've seen the research. Jimmy just greatly doubled and tripled the research into mental illnesses when he was president. And then George Bush, the first George Bush, added more research. And so we know now, as I said earlier, that mental illnesses can be diagnosed accurately and treated effectively. And even when we had the President's Commission on Mental Health in 1978, we never dreamed that people could recover. So I've seen that work, and I've worked with the whole mental health community, I think, in the United States over these years. And so much has changed. I think, I don't know how much my policy had. I couldn't measure the impact because a lot of other people have worked on it too. I worked on it for a long time before we could get. In fact, when I started the program, when Jim was governor, I couldn't even get people to come to my meetings because they didn't want to be associated with the issue. That was how bad the stigma was. People would not admit they had a mentally ill person in that family. And so I do think that with working on it for so long, so continuously, and struggling to get people to know the true facts about mental illnesses has been helpful.
She's had as much of an impact as anybody else in the world on mental health, not only in this country, but around the world.
Perfect. Our next question is going to be from Brian Quo. He is an electrical and computer engineering major. He's a member of Georgia Tech's solar racing team, and he also plays trumpet in the marching band.
Hi, President Carter and Mrs. Carter, thank you so much for being here today. It means a lot to all of us. So my question is for you, President Carter. So over my years at Georgia Tech as both an undergrad and a graduate student, these years have probably been some of the best years of my life, just from all the experience I've had as for example, in marching band and different student activities. So what would you say your favorite memory from the years over your time at Georgia Tech has been?
Well, this is one of the best, I have today. And coming to Georgia Tech was the first time I've been away from home. And certainly to go to a great university. And I didn't realize then what a panorama of life experiences it would open for me to come to Georgia Tech. When I had a chance to broaden my entire view of the world at Georgia Tech, I was very greatly benefited. Another thing that happened to me at Georgia Tech that paid off rich dividends for the rest of my life was Georgia Tech was then I don't know if it still is, but it was then concentrating on being the #1 engineering training place for people from Latin America. And we had special programs to teach future political leaders in South America and the Caribbean and Central America how to manage affairs of state. So a lot of friends I made at Georgia Tech who were from Latin America later became my friends when I was in the White House. So I think in every way, my experience at Georgia Tech, I was here for 4 quarters, a little bit more than a year. And I think it just broadened my entire concept of global affairs, of world affairs, and my possible more expanded role in public events and beyond the Navy years. When I was only 6 years old, if anybody asked me what are you going to do when you grow up, I didn't want to be a policeman or a conductor on a railroad. I wanted to go to Naval Academy. So I would say I want to go to Annapolis. And so Georgia Tech was a stepping stone for me at that time onto Annapolis. But I learned a lot of civilian aspects of higher education at Annapolis. Very little, but at Georgia Tech a lot. So Annapolis training that I got, which was beneficial too, was more confined to naval engineering. But at Georgia Tech I got a broad range of experiences and acquaintance with people from other countries that paid rich dividends. So in every way, my education at Georgia Tech has broadened my entire existence and my panoramic view of the world.
Fantastic. We are streaming this discussion online, and we have people watching on Facebook, and we actually have a question from someone who's watching on Facebook right now. It's from Dave Cathcart. And his question is, what would President Carter recommend to address the growing division between the upper and lower classes and the middle classes as well? What would you do to address the income inequality that is currently happening right now in the United States?
Well, when the year 1999 came along, I was asked to make 2 major speeches in the world. One was in Taiwan and the other was in Oslo, Norway. And I was asked to speak on the subject, what is the greatest challenge that the world faces in the new millennium? And my speech was the growing disparity between rich people and poor people, and which included powerful, influential people and those that are just average in their impact on surroundings. And so I made those speeches, and I haven't changed my mind. And since then, the disparity between rich nations and poor nations, on the one hand, and rich people and poor people inside a country, has grown by leaps and bounds. And a lot of that has been exacerbated greatly recently, in the United States at least, by the stupid decision made by the U.S. Supreme Court on Citizens United, where they ruled that a corporation had the same rights to participate in supporting political candidates as did a person. In fact, they've categorized a corporation as a person. And that has caused a tremendous deterioration or lowering of the standards in American democracy. The Carter Center has monitored 103 elections, and I told you, we wouldn't dream of monitoring a nation's elections that had the same laws as the United States, because you cannot possibly hope to be treated equally as a candidate in the United States unless you can raise $200 million from interested investors in your own political future, from corporations and from the labor unions and also from private citizens. When I ran for president as a Georgian against an incumbent, as you know, a very fine man, you know how much money we raised for the general election? Anybody want to guess? 0. We didn't get a single dollar from any contributor when Gerald Ford and I ran against each other for president. And when I ran 4 years later against Governor Reagan from California, we didn't raise a single dollar. At that time, we just got money that was contributed by each taxpayer, $1 maximum. And on the income tax return, you could put a little check mark if you gave $1. So we used those $1 contributions from all the taxpayers in America to finance our campaign. But now we have what can be called brutally in America as legal bribery, where major investors in benefits in the future will go to a congressman or a U.S. senator or governor or president who will accommodate that rich and powerful person. So we have much greater division now between the richest people on earth who benefit from tax breaks and from special laws and privileges, and the average person, the poor people or the middle class people. And that's one of the great lessons I hope we learned out of the 2016 election results. I think both parties, I think the Democrats and Republicans, will benefit in the long term from what happened in 2016 and what's happening now. We have 22 voters in our family, all of whom voted Democratic, so I'm biased on this subject. But let me point out that I think both Democrats and Republicans are now looking to see what happened in 2016 so we can avoid that pitfall again in the future. So I think we might have a long-term benefit from the outcome of the 2016. We might not experience it for the next 4 years, but perhaps we will. But anyway, that disparity between rich and poor people might be partially overcome because a lot of average Americans feel neglected by both parties, and that'll be part of reforms that will be incorporated into our political system. And I hope eventually we'll have public financing of campaigns, like we do in almost every other country on earth, where the average citizen finances the campaign. You don't have to raise special money to make commercials on TV that are mostly negative about your opponent. So that's just a few comments about this subject.
Fantastic. Next up, we're surprising a member of our audience who didn't know she was going to get a chance to ask a question. But it is from Irish Horsey, and she is getting her PhD in building construction.
Thank you very much, and it's truly an honor to be here this afternoon and just appreciate that all you've done for our country and for the world. My question is, how has faith played a role in accomplishing your achievements?
Well, I'm a Christian. I teach Bible lessons every Sunday in my little hometown church. And you're all welcome to come, not on the same Sunday, but... and on an average Sunday, we have about 25 members of my own congregation, and anywhere from 200 to 800 visitors who come to hear a politician teaching the Bible. So I still have a great deal. But I would say that my faith is basically been the foundation of my whole existence. And I never have found any disparity between my religious faith and my knowledge of engineering or science. My graduate work was in nuclear physics. So I never have found any disparity between that. And I never have found any difficulty as a governor of Georgia and president of the United States between my commitments in my oath of office to protect the United States and so forth and my beliefs as a Christian. And I think that that's a foundation for my two things that I mentioned earlier, peace and human rights. I worship the Prince of Peace, not war. And I think that my own religious faith, and also those of Judaism and Islam and Buddhism and so forth, are basically founded on the basic moral and ethical principles. I might add very quickly that one time in history, I think it's only one time, in history did the world come together to try to extract from the major religions the essence of our moral and ethical values. And that was when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was approved almost unanimously by the 45 countries that had prevailed in the Second World War. And that's the highest possible standard, I think, for us to go by. But my religious faith is very deep and basically, I think, so far unshakable, and I don't see any incompatibility between it and my other moral and ethical duties as a private citizen, even an engineer and a nuclear scientist. Thank you for your question.
Mrs. Carter, would you like to address that as well? Would you like to discuss what role faith has played in the decisions that you've been making over the past 40 years?
Well, Jim and I both grew up in the Bible Belt, Well, we went to church most people in our town went to church on Sunday, and it was a long time ago when we were small, growing up in Plains, and now we have almost 700 people in Plains. It's the diameter of our city is 1 mile, and so the whole entertainment and recreation was by our school and church, and that was just our lives, and that's how I grew up, and it's meant to me. It's been part of my life ever since.
Our next question actually comes from Twitter, and it is from Vijay Ramnath, and he's asking to you both, what advice would you each give to professionals who are trying to choose between various careers? How do you balance the need to maybe do something that will allow you to earn an income versus doing something that would also allow you to feel like you're giving something back to your community?
As I said earlier, I've been a professor at Emory for 33 years, and I see the student body go through and also changing professors sometimes. And I would say that we have cycles of commitment to benevolent causes. When I have a question, which I do quite often, what do you advise on a student that doesn't quite know what to do when they graduate or don't quite know what subject to choose? I tell them just to do what you think is best for you, but if you get out of college and don't have any particular commitment or job opportunity, go into Peace Corps and spend a year or two in the Peace Corps, and then you come back, you can have a better chance to get the job you want, because a Peace Corps career enables you to have a very high ranking in almost anybody looking for a new employee. So my mother was in the Peace Corps when she was 70 years old, and my grandson, Jason, who ran for governor last time, unsuccessfully, was in the Peace Corps as well. So going into the Peace Corps is a good opportunity. But I would say that in general, the choice of profession is what you come to naturally. And quite often it's affected by your parents' careers, and some of you inherit that. Others have a special interest in a particular subject. But I don't think any of my children knew what they wanted to do before they went to college. My oldest son, Jack, he was a graduate of Georgia Tech. He left here as a volunteer and went to Vietnam and served in the Navy, and then came back here and finished up. He got his degree in nuclear physics, and then when he got out of that job, he went to the University of Georgia. Excuse me the expression. And he got a law degree, and then he practiced law. So we have different backgrounds, but I think be flexible. Look at other students, what they do. Don't feel that you are permanently handicapped if you can't get a job immediately when you leave Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech has a very good rating in the percentage of graduates who get good jobs, and I'm sure you'll have the same experience. But if you don't, just take off a couple of years, go to the Peace Corps, learn all you can about the country you go into, learn a new language and so forth, then come back and start your career just 2 years later. So be flexible and keep your broad view and learn from others and from your professors, and pick out something that you think would be good for you the rest of your life, which I didn't do. I thought I was going to be a naval officer the rest of my life, and I got sidetracked into politics.
Well, I think that to join the Peace Corps or some organization like that when you get out of college is so important, because often, and you're thinking about what you want to do, often that experience changes your life, and you find something that's more appealing to you than you had anticipated. So I just think it's good for anybody who does not know what they really want to go into, just to take off, as Jimmy said, and a couple of years, and I guarantee you'll come back a different person.
I'd say a better person.
Fantastic. For our next question, we're going to go to Matt Kowalski. And Matt is also an electrical and computer engineering major, and he volunteers for the Special Olympics and Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you for that.
President and Mrs. Carter, it's an honor to be able to ask you this question. What is the most effective way for a college student to continue your humanitarian legacy?
To continue what?
Your humanitarian legacy.
Well, I think all of our relationships with other people are what you call a humanitarian legacy. And although I'm sure the number one question on your mind is, what am I going to do with my life when I graduate from Georgia Tech? Am I going to be a lawyer? Or am I going to be a doctor? Am I going to be an engineer? Am I going to be a scientist? Am I going to be a mathematician or whatever? But I would say the most important question for you to ask yourself is, what kind of person do I want to be? Which is a much more profound question. And I hope all of you will think about that. What kind of person do I want to be? And that brings us back down to the basic principles of life. And it's much more important than what profession you actually choose. What kind of person am I going to be? And so I think that's one of the great things that you can remember as you search for a legacy and for your human existence and for your relationship with other people. Will you be a kind person? Will you be an honest person? Will you be a humble person? Will you be a giving person? Will you be a loving person? And that relates not only to your future customers or your future bosses, but it also relates to your future husband or wife and your future children, grandchildren, and even your parents. So I think that's the most important question. If you don't remember anything else, remember that. What kind of person am I going to be? Not just what am I going to do for a living? Thank you.
Mrs. Carter, how would you answer that question?
I have heard Jimmy talk about that so much that I agree with him.
Fantastic. For our final question, we're going to go back to Facebook. And this question is from Asher Burnham. And Asher's question is, what region should America focus its foreign policy efforts on?
As far as what?
Its foreign policy efforts.
Well, that's constantly a changing proposition. The most important foreign policy question that's come up recently and in the campaign was the United States and Russia. I know Vladimir Putin quite well, and I have a respect for him for how he addresses the questions that I put to him and so forth. I think the most important bilateral relationship in the world now is between the United States and China for the present time and for the future. Since I normalized relations with China has never, since 1949, China has never participated in any sort of combat with other people. They've never had any war with another country or never had a skirmish with another country. I think in general, we should take care of Latin American affairs, and Europe is an important ally. But I would say for bilateral relationships, probably China would be the number one issue for us to address. The Carter Center has had a very special relationship with the People's Republic of China, partially because I normalized relations between the two countries. We've been invited to participate in some important Chinese affairs. For 12 years, Rosa and I in the Carter Center were in charge of all the small village elections in China. There were 650,000 small villages, and we were called upon by the Chinese government to orchestrate an election process in those little villages that was honest and fair and democratic in all of its facets. So we did that, and we monitored those elections all over China, and we gave them advice on how to have a more pure democracy. By the way, the little villages are not part of the Communist Party system. That starts with the big cities and then counties and provinces, and from that they elect the People's Congress that governs China. So I would say those aspects, but I think we should have as a generic treatment of all countries the two things I mentioned earlier, and that is to treat them peacefully and to honor human rights. And so that's more generic. Specifically, I would say number one issue would be to have good relationships with China.
Mrs. Carter, anything you'd like to add?
I've been involved in foreign policy with Jimmy. I sit in on a good many of his sessions. When he was president, I sat in the White House and wrote a lot about that, more than I wrote about my programs, because I knew what I was doing in my programs. But when I was sitting in with the men on women and foreign affairs, I was learning. I was learning more about the world, and I just think that we have to treat other people as we would treat ourselves. It troubles me now with what's going on in Washington with picking out certain people you don't like, and that I think that's the worst possible way to develop foreign affairs relationships with any country.
Before we wrap up, I was wondering if you could each give our students just one final piece of advice. If there was one thing you would want to leave Georgia Tech students with, what would that advice be?
Okay, study hard, tell the truth, promote peace and human rights in your life, and treat other people as equals, or even as superiors. And if you're in doubt about what to do, join the Peace Corps. So you've got a lot of advice from us this afternoon. And I know Rosa's going to add, I'll let you tell, take care of the mentally ill.
That's
right.
Right? That's right. And I have another program, too, that developed out of my mental health work is caregiving. Caregiving for people who have handicaps, illnesses, and so forth. And one of our programs now is working with caregivers, taking care of veterans and soldiers who come back with all kinds of wounds and so forth. So I think that, not that that adds into the advice I've given you, but I think if you let people know that you care about them, our world will be a better place.
Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you all very much.